Hello and welcome to this edition of Akrinos Access. I'm Eric Matei and very excited to be featuring a very special guest on this episode of Akrinos Access, Dr. Andreas Zacharopoulos, as we're going to explore the whole world of tackling your optometry school loans. Dr. Zacharopoulos, man, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Eric. It's good to see you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, look, a lot of really great things that I know. Looking forward to jumping into. So, what do you say we hop right into it and start the conversation the way I like starting all these conversations with this, which is just share a little bit about your background and I suppose professionally how you got into optometry.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing I always joke is that, like, I'm Greek and I lived there when I was a kid and I have like 20,000 relatives. So like when you come from a Greek family, like it's usually two options that you're kind of like, here's the way, here's your path. And it's either join the restaurant business, which I was like not about, worked for my dad for like a few weeks and I was like, nope, nope. And the other path was be a doctor. So I'm like, it seems like way more, I don't know. I didn't like it as much as the pursuit of being a doctor. So that was kind of like, okay, like healthcare field might be nice. And but of course that's not why I did it. A few things. One of the first things that got me into it was, like most optometrists, it's kind of like your first eye exam. And I don't wear glasses or contacts, so like for me, my first eye exam, I was like 8 years old, and the only time I got there is because I had this kind of like this eye twitch, like it was kind of like twitching like this for a while.
Sure. Yeah.
And at first my brother was like, "Oh, you're playing video games, just stop." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." And then, but like it like wouldn't go away. So for like 6 weeks, so I'm just like twitching here, and like my cousins are making fun of me, and then my mom was like, "What's wrong with my kid? Like, what's going on?" So she just off the optometrist she go, and so this is back in Greece. So I went to this doctor. He showed me all the equipment. He did the whole test. He's very, very, very nice bedside manner, and the parents are always like, "Oh, see, this is good career." So anyways, yeah. So he did all the tests, and basically I had what's called lid monokemia, which is a very benign lid. It's a lid twitch of one eyelid, and it's very common. You'll see it often with like people that had like students taking their finals,
Sure.
or parents that just had a kid and they're like the terrible twos.
Sure.
And so whenever you have that, the doctor asks you all these questions like, sleep a lot. Do you don't sleep a lot? Do you drink coffee? Like stress in your life, dehydration, all these things. And I'm like, dude, I'm 8. Like, what do you mean? And so it turns out, like, I actually found that out because like we didn't know then, and he just had me do some pencil push-ups, and somehow it went away 3 months later. But when I was studying optometry school, I actually figured out like why that was the case. Is because it was actually because of video games. There's a new game that was out, and I was actually playing nonstop, and whatever it elicits the twitch. Even when you stop, it kind of like it could persist for a while. So that's kind of like the story of like, okay, like how I got my door in the eye doctor. But then like that visit kind of got stuck into me as as you're a teenager, you're like, what should I do with my life? Then a few other things happened. Like an optometrist came to my dad's restaurant and told him about how the job was awesome. And then I took physics in high school and I thought that was awesome. And I was like anatomy in undergrad. I thought the eyeball was like crazy interesting. So I
Awesome.
feel like
Yes.
all these different like steps kind of like got me to, hey, maybe optometry is a good career. So I thought about it more. I wanted to help people, wanted to give people, the gift of eyesight. And the more I learned it, the more I was interested. At some point, I was like, you know what, I'm in, and never look back. So
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So where exactly did you go to school and what year?
yeah, I went to Nova Southeastern University. That's in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
And I graduated in 2019.
Nice. Awesome.
And then after that, I did. You could do a residency if you want. So I did one in the Orlando VA Medical Center for a year, and then that was it. So
Nice. Nice. So on that note, as far as specialties, I mean, what's in your wheelhouse? What do you get all fired up to take care of?
Yeah. I mean, so obviously I still love the routine stuff. Like I know optometry is always like, the refraction is like one of like the least favorite parts, and it can be, sometimes it can be a nuisance, but just I do love like when first eye exam or like they've had glasses that are 6 years old, they can't see anything, or they have cataracts or whatever. Just like doing the prescription and then going like, hey, you see clear. and then I take it away and they're like, whoa, like it was like that
Yeah,
bad.
that's awesome.
So I mean, I do like the routine stuff, but I mean, I did a residency in ocular disease, so like disease is really like what like fires me up. Like a patient's in my chair with like a red eye, or like they got, I think it's glaucoma, or they have some kind of, some kind of reaction to something, or they have an ulcer. Those are the things that like get me really, get my brain going and get me like really like kind of it spices up my day per se.
Sure.
Not that you
Yeah.
want your patients to have disease, but when they do, you want to be the person to kind of help them out. So
Absolutely.
I definitely that I would say that in terms of like specialties per se, like things I'm really good at. Out of the disease section, I feel like in residency everybody had glaucoma, so I felt like a glaucoma subspecialty per se, and so
Sure.
I spent a lot of time with that in the clinic too. So.
Awesome. Okay, so a 2019 grad, being a new grad is still like fresh on your mind. So kind of share a little bit about just like what your interests were. I mean, so coming out of school, like what were your career interests, your goals, your priorities, like
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when I graduated, I was kind of thinking of different things, but private practices was kind of like really interested in me. I I've always thought of like owning a business and being able to kind of like control my schedule. And I think the big thing for me, and that's why like I'm still kind of like, I'm still kind of like deciding whether I want to go that route, or like it's still in the back of my mind. I'm pretty sure I'm still, I'm actually in talks negotiating right now for a practice, but we'll see how that goes. But I think like my main goal is, if you have to like really dial it down, is let's say 5-10 years from now, I want to be in a place in my life where I can work 3, maybe 4 days a week, and like be able to kind of like that work-life balance, hang out with my future kids, be able to kind of like do everything, the things that I want to do. And I know it kind of sounds like very like, romanticized. And I know my dad is like, oh, you don't want to work, but I don't know. I feel like I want to, like, if I own a practice, for example, like my boss right now, he works 3 days a week and I work the other 2. And so he runs a practice, but with that, he's able to kind of have more flexibility in his schedule, and you can schedule your vacations or schedule your time with your family, or do, pick up the hobbies or whatever, or kind of like be in control of your life basically. So that's kind of like what my goal has always been, work-life balance. Okay, now how do I get there?
Sure.
And the kind of avenue that I kind of look for right now is private practice. So that's one of the first things when I first graduated. I was like, okay, let me join a private practice, and with that has the potential to buy in. So.
That's awesome. So you've been working in that practice since day one, or
yeah?
What are some of the other environments you've been around?
Yeah, so after residency, like literally like a week after residency, I joined the practice because I lived for the longest time in Dunedin, which is in the Tampa Bay, Clearwater area. And so like right before, like a few months before I graduated, one of the surgeons in the shadow, he's like, oh, you're from Dunedin? Do you know Dr. Toops? And I'm like, oh, no. And he turns out he was like 5 minutes away from my house. I had no idea the practice was there. Like no idea. I actually drove by it every day. But and I had no idea.
That's great. That's awesome.
And so literally I connected with him, and then literally a week after I graduated, he hired me. The only thing is it's a 1 doctor practice, and he's not ready to retire yet. He just wanted to kind of like work less. So he's a 1 doctor practice working 5 days a week. So he gave me 2 days of starting, and he got the other 3. So like I work twice a week there, but then the other 3 days I got to figure out like, okay, like I need to work, I need to make money somehow. I got all this debt. So
sure.
Then that's when the whole fill-in work came in. Like over the past few years, I've worked at like 8 different places, like throughout the whole Tampa Bay area, and kind of really figured out like where I wanted, which places I like, which ones I didn't like, which ones like paid me decently, which ones were like not good at all. And I'm just kind of still at that point where I'm still working 2 days a week, but now I'm literally next week will be 2 years into the practice, and we've really had these conversations about like what the next step is. So.
That's exciting. And I tell you, you're not alone, and this practice is not alone. There are truly thousands of practices across the country that this is occurring, and thousands of doctors just like you that have an interest in practice ownership, and let's figure out a way to make it work. And if it means doing 3 days a week there and then finding fill-in work elsewhere, hey, make it happen. Forge those relationships, because there are a lot of doctors that are looking for that the optometrist to come in as a legacy buyout, as opposed to a private equity deal or what have
Yeah,
you. Of course,
for
look,
sure.
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah,
in itself.
yeah,
But it's I think it's a great segue into this whole world of student loans, right?
yeah,
Because what you did is very impressive, right? And I'm looking forward to hearing kind of your story about it. But the fact is, virtually everyone is coming out of school with debt, and
yeah,
many doctors do have various priorities, whether it is to foray into the world of practice ownership and career aspirations, or perhaps other aspirations in their personal life, purchase a home, start a family, what have you. So share with us a little bit about this background of kind of like how you came to get this mindset of, you know what, we're just gonna
yeah.
like knock this stuff down. So I suppose like the first question would be is like, what inspired you to pay it off so quickly?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a great question. Well, I mean, first off, I feel like there's also the personality type. Like, I've noticed there's a lot of people that are like, they hate debt, and there's a lot of people that like, they don't care too much for it. They're okay with leveraging it. They'd rather invest or buy a practice or do all this stuff. And so for me, I'm definitely on the I hate debt side. I hate owing people money. Even when I was like younger, I was like, if I lent somebody money, I was like, oh, immediately I gotta pay it back.
Yeah, right.
But like for me, it's like, everybody like loves the first paycheck, right? Your first paycheck as a doctor, you're like, I got this fat, like this is like doctor money. This is what I worked for my whole life. This is like amazing. And at first, like, this is my money. This is awesome. And then you realize like this is not my money. This is somebody else's money. I owe so much, I gotta pay back. So
Sure.
that kind of like realization was like, okay, I gotta do something about this. The calculation that I did in terms of how much money and what the interest is what really kind of like put into perspective. So like basically after I graduated, like after residency, I basically owed 182 grand. That's I took out 157, I think around there 160. But then during optometry school, 25 grand of interest kind of like built up. And that's kind of like one of the things that like if you're a student watching this, like that's kind of like the main thing where like don't be the type to like splurge where you're like, oh, I got debt anyway, so let me go ahead, buy a $50 bottle of wine all the time, or buy this like huge, super expensive TV that I don't need, because like your $50 bottle of wine with the interest is like you're actually paying like $200 when you account for it. So like that's kind of a good mentality to think of like, okay, like maybe kind of dial it back. But for me, it's like 180 grand. That's the debt. My average interest was like I had a bunch of loans, but the average is like 5.88. So
Sure.
that's 10 grand a year of interest divided by 365 days. That's $29 a day. So like literally in school during residency, I'm just chilling here every day, $29, boom, $29, boom. And so it's like that kind of motivated more to be like, okay, I got to do something about this. And I don't want to be like one of those horror stories where it's like, hey, I owe 200 grand and I did the minimum payment, and now 3 years later I owe more than I did. And it's like you get stuck in like this like deep hole that you can't dig out yourself out. So numerically, those are kind of like, like I'm kind of in deep doo pretty much.
Sure. Yeah.
And the third thing I'd say, and this is actually probably hit me to home, was I have extended family members that like are in debt. Like, I mean, my parents, like, they were never educated, so like, they never really learned how to invest and all that stuff. But I have one particular family member, not in my family, but my extended family, who like should be at the point where like they should be retired, they should be living their golden years, they should be doing all these things, but instead they're working like a dog. They're working harder than I am, and to see that is kind of like, man, I don't want that to happen to me. And it's so bad that like now their kids are kind of like have to take a little bit of the burden, so it's kind of like
Right.
I don't want to be in that situation. So literally there's so many reasons in addition to my personality that's like, okay, like my first priority, before I get kids, before I buy into a practice, before I have all these things that might make me slow down my loan payment, I just graduated. Let me just like gun ho, just work at it.
That's awesome. Okay, so did you have a game plan? Like, was there
Yeah.
like a method to this, or you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna work? Were you working what, 6, 7 days a week?
No, 5 days probably.
Okay.
5 days.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I did. I mean, I probably would have been 6 or 7, but I also have my side hustle, which is KMK, which
Sure.
that basically I'm an instructor for that company. But it took
Okay.
me like over the first 2 years of training, I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours. So and I was still making a little bit of money, but like basically instead of filling that 6th, 7th day, I was basically working on that. So like
Okay.
the first two, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're good. No, I was just saying like the first year or two, it's kind of like, if I didn't have that, I probably would be doing that 6th or 7th day. And if
Sure.
actually in the first year or two, it'd probably be more financially advantageous to do that. Now, of course, I've been trained to do that, and I've had all the experience. Obviously, the company is amazing. I love working for them. And the impact they have on optometry students is great. But yeah, it's kind of like you're doing full time, and some. You kind of have to
Yeah. Because my question was going to be a day of KMK or a day doing fill-in work, which was paying better. I would hope KMK.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a day of KMK, yeah, but it's not the day of it. It's like the preparation to it. So like if you want to go to a school and teach to 50 students 12 hours straight on anatomy, physiology, and disease, like you have to have study for boards for like after you pass like multiple years. So it's kind of like, when I was first in the trenches, like literally like when I was studying, I was like, oh man, like this is like when you per hour, it's like this is like $5, so, but of course, down the line, it's kind of like optometry school. Like the first 4 years, you're like, I hate this. Why am I doing this? Sometimes you get to this, when you're really working hard, and obviously now it's like paying off for the rest of your career. So.
Sure. Yeah. Fascinating. Awesome. Okay. So coming out of school, to bring everyone up to speed, right? Coming out of school, you were like, you know what? I think I do like this idea. I feel pulled in the direction of private practice, but I don't like owing people money. So before I go and borrow money to purchase a practice, let me pay off my school loans. And you were like, we're going to do it. And we're going to do it by working 3 days a week in a private practice, fill in work the 2 other days a week, and then also the side hustle, KMK Education.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Which you assured everyone that KMK Education does pay better than a day's of fill-in work. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Especially now, but yeah, exactly.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. So that being said, how did you budget? Because quite frankly, when you just like look at the numbers themselves, it's like, wow.
Yeah, man. At first, it's very overwhelming, and I remember like when I first got download my Mint app, like the budgeting, and then it's like it pulls up your net worth, and it's like negative 160 grand, and I'm like, this is not good at all. Very, very discouraging. But I say, the first thing, and this is actually something that was really helpful. So like during COVID, actually, like March of 2020, I wasn't towards the end of residency, and like we didn't have patients, so like literally all like I have to do. I was like, okay, let me learn about investing and let me learn about like budgeting and all that stuff. And so I bought that Bowie and Dr. Neurenfeld's book, like The ODs on Finance, like Path to Freedom.
Yes.
And it was amazing. I highly recommend it. But one of the things that caught me in the beginning, it literally said, there's really like most students should be able to pay off their debt in under 5 years. And I'm like, really? Like, because we were always taught like, 10 years is the average. But literally under 5 kind of makes sense. And I'm like, okay, well, let me run the math for that. And so let's say 200 grand, right? 200 grand is like your loan, the average, OD, 7% interest. Let's say you don't refinance, just assume. And then during 5 years, how much we have to pay a month. And so you put it on the little calculator, and on Google, they could find the loan calculator. And it was basically $4 grand a month. So if you pay $4 grand a month for 5 years, that's like 237 grand, which is 200 grand plus interest. I feel like, and I looked at it, I'm like, okay, I think that's reasonable. Because like $4 grand a month over a year is 48 grand, and the starting OD salary is double, maybe triple of that. ODs are now graduating like their starting job is 120K plus benefits, or it's 130, 140, sometimes even more depending on what they get. Some of the corporate ones are like even more. So I'm like, okay, that's definitely possible. Then all the other stories on ODs on Finance, people paying off their loans. Okay, that other success stories. I'm like, okay, that's really good. One of them was actually Dr. Kayla Brown. There was an article on Always on Finance about Dr. Kayla Brown. She paid off 180 grand, same amount that I had, in 7 years, while dealing with her husband's leukemia. So I'm like, all right, well, like if she can do that in 7 years, dealing with her husband's leukemia, I should be able to do it 5 without having to deal with that.
Sure. Yeah.
So what I'm saying with this, like the first thing is kind of look at like what's realistic, because the worst thing obviously you can do is make a very unrealistic plan. 6 months in, you don't meet it, and now you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna give up. And so maybe it could be like, okay, if your goal is 200 grand in 5 years, make it 4 grand a month, no matter what, 4 grand a month. Now what I did, I like to do this thing where like I I would actually, so the first thing I do, I have like a 3 month emergency fund, like in my bank. Let's say I have 7 grand in my savings. And then in my checking, I kind of decided what's a number where I feel like I'm comfortable, like having it, like I won't like, be in trouble. So let's say if I have 3 grand in my checking, that should be able to, cover my rent, subscriptions, auto insurance, whatever, if it gets automatically pulled and I don't notice it. Therefore, if I log in one day and I see there's 5 grand in my checking, boom, 2 grand is going straight to loans.
Sure. Okay. So that's how you were. 'Cause I was going to ask if you were making extra payments.
Yeah.
So that's how you were doing it, is when you would see windfalls. What would result in a windfall? I mean, do you have incentive compensation in these different arrangements you have, or?
Wait, what do you mean for windfalls?
Well, no, just what would be an instance that you would find that all of a sudden, like, you would have this extra money sitting there that wasn't already going to
Right.
the loans in addition to expenses?
Yeah. So I guess for me, it's like because of COVID, like I actually didn't have to make any payments. So it's kind of like partly up to me, which is really good, but also kind of bad too, because it's kind of like if you have like 50 grand in your bank, it's like you kind of want to spend it. So so I kind of make a separate account, and basically every month I'd put, let's say, like 5 grand or whatever, 3 grand or whatever. But then let's say I do work that extra fill-in shift. Let's say let's say there's a Target Optical and the doctor is like, hey, I'm going on vacation, or my kid has surgery or whatever. Can you cover for me for 3 days? The fill-in work is kind of like, okay, I wouldn't expect to work there. So that's like maybe over 3 days you make, I don't know, let's say $1,500 or whatever. That's kind of already extra income going in there.
Sure.
And so I kind of like, and what I would do, I would probably like just log into my bank like every week or so, just because of my 2 days at practice and 3 days at fill-in, I got paid very regularly. So like I got my paycheck every 2 weeks, but then I got like all the different, so it's kind of fluctuate, like staggering per se.
Right.
And so I guess you can make it in a more organized way if you only have one paycheck and it's every 2 weeks. So if you are in that way, kind of plan, okay, if you want to spend that $5 grand a month, get your paycheck, do that first, with your loans, your car payments, whatever, all the requirements. That's what they call pay yourself first. All the required things. Then if you have anything left, you can either kind of have a splurge month where you kind of ball out, or you can be like, I feel incredibly motivated, or I saw this article, it made me feel good, I'm gonna spend an extra K or whatever to the loans. So
nice.
I hope
Awesome.
that kind of like me.
Awesome. Really great advice there. Absolutely. So here you are. Okay, so here you are, and you made that last payment sometime in the last 6 months. Yeah.
It was March 10th, Mario Day.
That's awesome, man. That is so cool. That must have felt absolutely incredible.
Oh my God, it felt amazing. And the thing is, actually, I would have paid it in January, but I just moved to another apartment, and so you know how that is, like, a new lease, down payment, extra
damage
deposit.
Oh yeah.
So it's like I had the money. We're like, okay, I could theoretically like pay it off, but then I'd have like $1,000 in my account. So I just burned through my emergency. So it's like, okay, like let me do the waiting game, wait a little bit, and then finally, like, whenever I had enough, I just like put it out there.
It all worked out.
Yeah, it all worked out. And I guess another thing I didn't say too, like in terms of like budgeting or advice, one of the things that I guess I had the opportunity to do because I worked in so many different places is literally negotiate. Because like, when you're like a student and you're about to graduate, you don't think you know anything, and you're like, you have no money, and then an employer is like, hey, here's the bare minimum, and to you it looks like a gold mine, and you take it, and now you're stuck in that, like, you have a low starting, so even with all the raises or whatever, it's gonna take you a while. So I would definitely say negotiate, know your worth. Even if you're doing fill-in, like I would tell them, like let's say I'm working at a different place, I say, hey, like this is kind of what I'm expecting, or like, hey, I've done a residency, or I've done this, or like, basically try to, market yourself pretty much. And actually, if you're doing a lot of fill-in too, you could think of in terms of like production. So like a lot of places that I work at, I'm like, hey, don't pay me like a per diem, pay me a lower minimum, or 60% of production, let's say, whichever is higher. And so from then, like I found like my fill-in work is paying me way more than my practices.
Sure.
So that's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's definitely like what I would say, like hands down, like negotiate, like make sure, even in your contract, make sure that like whatever you go with, have an advisor look at it. Maybe have Chris Lopez from Always on Finance look at your contract, and you can negotiate you like an extra 20 grand or whatever. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is, I'm really glad you bring that up, right? Because there's so much opportunity for equitable revenue share based compensation that is truly a win-win for all parties involved. It's a fascinating world. And yes, Dr. Chris Lopez, really, I mean, he's reviewed, I believe, over like 250, 300 contracts. Fascinating stuff. Yes, highly recommend. Definitely get stuff reviewed with Dr. Lopez. Dr. Zacharopoulos, just a couple closing questions for you.
oh, is the time already? Wow, time flies fast. Yeah.
Well, unless there were any more insights you wanted to share along the way. I mean, it's sounds.
Let's see, we're kind of going back and forth. I mean, how'd you budget? You said earlier, live below your means, what everybody will tell you.
That's
if you're
it.
gonna, if you're gonna go out and have a bunch of shots pregame before, if we're gonna, definitely cook more. I've noticed now it's like, I have the urge to like, oh, I have money, I'll go out and eat, and it's like each meal is like over $20 when you could like, grill 5 pounds of chicken, and meal prep, and that was like 15 for like actually like multiple days. So
Yes, absolutely.
Google budgeting tips, get a good accountant. That was another key too. Because of especially for my situation, if you have a lot of 1099 income, because I have W2 with my boss and then 1099 with fill-in work and KMK, it's like my accountant is like make an S corp, and taught me all about like write-offs and all that stuff. And he basically, I think last year he saved me like, I should have paid like 10 grand more in taxes. So
Nice.
it might apply to you, it might not apply to you. Just talk to your accountant of what your options are depending on the situation. So
Absolutely.
That's another thing.
Absolutely. So what's next for you? I mean, what's next steps here? You're debt free. You're a few years in. You've kind of got this. You got this world of optometry figured out. What's next for you?
Yeah. So for sure, keep at it with KMK. Actually, I think next year is supposed to have like now that I'm like fully trained and it's been a year, I think they're gonna send me like double the schools that I normally go. So definitely do that. It's really fulfilling. I love it.
Awesome.
Like I said, I'm talking with my boss about like the next steps. So there's definitely that. I've looked into private ownership, kind of the whole appraisal process, all that stuff with, and I don't know where I'll go, but I think at the end of the day, it's like as long as I'm shooting for that work-life balance, that's kind of like, that's kind of my key. Thought about buying a house, but housing market's crazy, so I'm not sure. I think I'll rent for a little bit and see how it goes and go from there. So, and of course, when I first paid it off, it's funny at first. It's like, I'm used to like every day look like building up to the March 10th date. I look at my like Mint app like every other day. I'm like, what's my
right?
Like what's going have I made more money? Or like what's my budgeting? And then like it's like my chart was going up like this. As soon as I paid it off, it was just like, and then like go down because I was paying for all these things, and like I went on vacation, like buy a new laptop, like eat out more often, and then I'm like, oh, I gotta calm down now. So
Sure.
Yeah. So after my next vacation, I'll definitely calm down.
Nice. Excellent. Well, Dr. Andreas Zacharopoulos, man, thank you so much for joining us, talking about tackling optometry school loans. I guess to kind of close things out, if anyone would like to reach out to you directly, how might they connect with you on the socials?
Yeah, I mean, my name is really easy to find, so just private message me or either on Facebook or Instagram. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to talk to, so just
excellent.
Always down for that. Yeah, and Eric, thanks for giving me this outlet because it's, it's very demotivating when you first graduate. You're like, oh, like, I have all this debt and like I'm worried about a job, and like even if you don't have a contract, like you can literally just start doing fill-in until you find your contract. So it was always very nice for me to look online and see all these other doctors that are like, okay, they're doing this, let me follow in their footsteps. So it's kind of like, okay, I've done this work, like here it goes, maybe it helps somebody. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us. To our viewers out there, follow us on the socials, subscribe to our YouTube channel, visit akrinos.com for everything you'll need to know regarding tackling your optometry school loans and a whole host of really cool topics we cover. Dr. Zacharopoulos, thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric.
Godspeed.
All right, maybe I reach out to you for private practice stuff, you know.